we fail, I think, when we have this very single story of dogs as being pets to see the complexity of dog relationships in the world.
That's right. And I think what you said about domestication, as you said, it's political.
Mm-hmm.
In dogs, the story, domestication seems, as far as I know, it seems almost unique in some ways, because the story of how dogs became a species, so the story of the becoming of dogs in science, is through domestication. So without domestication, dogs would not have become a species. Put that in a really simple way. I'm just going to take this off the top of my head. I'm not sure if it's completely accurate, but let's just say wild ox. So wild ox is a wild ox. It is a species. And then it is domesticated. The story of dogs is slightly different to that. The story of dogs is that dogs were wolves until they were domesticated. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, so until they were domesticated. So basically what is being said here is that domestication is synonymous with speciation. So dogs would not have been dogs, or the evolutionary story would not have unfolded. That's not the right word to use in relation to evolutionary theory, but I'm going to use it. It is in terms of a story. But the story of dogs wouldn't have unfolded in the way that it did if there hadn't been domestication. So, this is the argument that dogs were the original domesticates. So their domestication precedes the agricultural revolution, which is when most other animals were domesticated. That speciation, as I've said, is connected to domestication, if not synonymous with it. So, as I said, dogs kind of transform themselves as a consequence of their relationship with humans. And as a consequence of that, then we have this kind of unique relationship between dogs and humans. So it's quite a distinct story in relation to domestication. One of the ways that it's very easy to capture, and I use this in teaching, there's a slide that I found, which is, it basically shows that, that kind of story that is told visually of the shape of the human body as it progresses, for example, from
from an ape standing more upright.
Exactly. And alongside that very common picture, visual, is a dog. So we've got the first dog howling at the moon, and that is obviously a wolf. And then it goes through kind of different shapes of dogs, and we end up with a dog on the lead, and a much smaller dog on the lead than some of the middle period dogs. The reason that picture is really important is because of the first position and the final position. So the dog is the wolf, and the whole way through that transition, that dog is standing next to a human, and then it ends up being the dog in the house today. Now, I'm not sure, I can't say for certain, but I don't think that there are any other species stories that have such a tight connection between the way in which an animal becomes what it is, a species becomes what it is, and humans and what humans are up to. So domestication is political anyway, as you say, but in the case of dogs, the story that is told about dogs, the ways in which scientists make sense of what a dog is, domestication is not just a kind of, it's kind of profoundly ontological in these stories. You can't take domestication out of the dog.
But I think the same thing with other species. Like, I think, again, coming back to cows, again, I think how it's positioned in the story has to be looking at where the story is being told and for who. Because, again, domestication and cows, like cows' physiology changed. It would be interesting to have that same dialogue with cows, because cows got much smaller and then much bigger. And then you've got the kind of same thing as dogs. You've got the expansion of the idea of cow through breeds, right? You've got breeding practices that really intervene in cows' bodies dramatically, so much so that today's cow and, the auroch, both large animals would look very, very different, because a Holstein cow would have swollen udders that are too big, producing more milk than she can possibly do. So there are these physiological changes. But the story that we've told with regards to cows and milk and human health also has sustaining power. But that's not premised, I think, in the same way as the intimacy with dogs. I feel like intimacy seems to be this key factor in the dog story that isn't as present in, let's say, a cow story or a chicken story. Again, depending on the context you're in. Because I would suspect in India, for example, cows would feature much more prominently in terms of, let's say, a social cultural story of Indian communities than dogs would. And this is pure conjecture. I don't know myself. But either way, domestication in both of these has been a practice and a process that has shaped both the human, dogs, cultures, environments that are involved.